there are elections that come and go. Some elections are, you know, important, some are not. But this one, this one really mattered. And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you. My heart goes out to you. It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured.
One thing I like to do when a story goes viral, especially when it's one of these typical, like, you know, stories that are designed to create some type of divisiveness in the population, whether it be racial divisiveness, sexual divisiveness, political divisiveness. This is just another one of those. And I feel like it's a healthy practice to put your opinions aside for a second and just observe what the media is doing and ask yourself, how does the media want me to respond to this? And how much am I playing into their need to make me respond to that? What are they going to get out of it? You know, what is the result they want? What type of consent are they trying to manufacture from me? And I find if you take that viewpoint to most of the mainstream news, you tend to see it for what it is. And for the most part, it's just all propaganda and some type of consent being manufactured for the elites that don't care about any of us. Anyway, I can remember watching this live. I was watching it live when Elon Musk gave the speech, and I didn't even notice he did that. And you know, I'm someone who looks for symbolic gestures and stuff, and I don't always claim to be the most observant person, but the overall tone of Elon Musk when he gets on stage with Trump tends to be that of kind of like a happy child, you know, jumping up in the air. Yay, yay, I'm Elon Musk, here I am. I'm bringing the fun to the party. I'm the interesting, you know, billionaire everyone loves. Although since he switched from being sort of a, you know, Tony Stark type champion of the left billionaire guy, as soon as he bought Twitter and started talking about free speech, everyone started hating him. And he kind of drifted towards the right, I guess, you know, aligning himself with Donald Trump and talking about free speech, which, I don't know, it's kind of weird that trying to champion free speech and saying things like, you know, free speech means allowing people with opinions you dislike to speak. Saying things like that doesn't seem far right at all to me. That's just what free speech is. I mean, you know, I've said this in an older blog where I was talking about some of my original inspiration, you know, to do what I do here on these blogs. And I name Noam Chomsky. And he wrote a book, I think it was called Manufacturing Consent. They made a movie out of it. And it kind of changed my life because this idea of being, you know, of being able to we can picture cars being manufactured. We can picture, you know, a warehouse where meat's being slaughtered and packed, or where food's being put in a can. But the idea of manufacturing consent, and as soon as I heard it, I thought to myself, yeah, that has to exist. That must be what they're doing. All these things just came together in my head at once. And, you know, as I say in that older video, I don't necessarily adhere to everything Noam Chomsky says. I don't really like his views on 9/11. He seems to be very much about not acknowledging that it was an inside job, which bugs me quite a bit because he's a very intelligent man. I don't know how he doesn't see that, but anyway, Noam Chomsky is a Jew, okay? And he's known as being a champion of the left. But he wrote the foreword to a book, I forgot what it was called, but it was written by a guy who claimed the Nazi gas chambers didn't exist. And in that foreword, he explained the reason I'm doing this is because I think that, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting him directly, you can go look up that older blog, I think it's called A Message to You, Part 1. Noam Chomsky speaks about how, you know, someone, you know, if you're not willing to defend the free speech of someone with, you know, the antithesis of your views, you know, Noam Chomsky's a Jew, and this guy's saying the gas chambers in Auschwitz didn't exist. he was making a point about free speech. He's saying, look, I'm a Jew, but I'm defending this guy's right to say what he wants to say. That doesn't mean I want to run out and do that, or anyone else should do it. But I mean, he chose to do that to make a bold statement about free speech. I don't know what to make of Elon Musk. He kind of reminds me of, I mentioned Tony Stark earlier. If you've ever looked into the history of Iron Man, the character Iron Man that Stan Lee created, Stan Lee explains, if you look this up, he explains that when he created Iron Man, the threat of nuclear war was big in the air, and a lot of people were afraid of getting bombed. So there was this stereotype of kind of like some narcissistic group of people or individuals who think they're smarter and better and richer and more powerful than everyone else. And there's this button sitting there, and they're all talking about maybe pressing the button. So there was this very like anti-war, anti-technology. The idea of big bombs and big technology was, people associated that with a fear of getting bombed by some jerk who doesn't care about the population and thinks he should just do away with them all. So he created Tony Stark to endear that type of character to the public, and he says this in an interview. I'm paraphrasing, but I speak about this in another blog. I forget which one, Watchmen or something. Anyway, point being, I think Elon Musk is a modern day, the real life Tony Stark. Not even real life. I don't know how much of the guy is real. I mean, they say he's autistic, which is supposed to account for his kind of odd physical behavior at times, and the Anti-Defamation League seems to be chalking up this gesture to that. And I couldn't argue with them. It does look a little awkward looking at a second time, but I mean, I think the gesture is pretty clear. He touches his heart, and his words make it clear that he's speaking from the heart, saying thank you. And there are non-whites in the audience he's speaking with there, and he talks about defending. I forgot what the measure was called. It was some kind of measure where people from other countries can be brought in under an employment status, and he hires a lot of Indian people. And he was working with Vivek Ramaswamy on this new Doge program that Trump had them both working on. Which I think Vivek Ramaswamy has actually been talking about stepping down from. But point being, Elon Musk to just so quickly assume that he's some kind of Nazi just because of this gesture is absolutely ridiculous. But it's not ridiculous if you're in the media and you need to. Actually, Elon Musk put it very, very well right here. Apparently, he said this on X. He said, frankly, they need better dirty tricks. The everyone is Hitler attack is so tired. If nothing else, Elon is just very good at articulating things like that. He's a very good troll. He's very good with one-liners on, online, on forums and things like that. He's a smart guy, but I just wonder, where he's really coming from sometimes. I mean, his shift, from the left to the right appeared very natural to me. It seemed to me he was just responding to, what was happening in the world around him in a very natural way. However, it's hard to believe he just walked in there and bought Twitter. That's very difficult to believe that they would allow someone like him, an independent, to just do that. They being the powers that be, the great oppressor, I like to call it. And, people have accused Elon Musk of being owned by China, having all these, feet in Chinese money, which is valid because the FBI director, I believe, said recently, a couple of weeks ago, that China was maybe the biggest threat to face the U.S. and the world at this time. And I think that was Christopher Wray, and he's not known to be a big friend of Trump. Quite the opposite. I kind of see Elon Musk as, unfortunately, some kind of mind control. I call him mind job. Someone who's groomed at a very young age to do something very important in society, whether it be a musician or a politician or a mass murderer. And I think Elon Musk's oddities, his little tics or whatever they are, his physical weirdnesses. They say it's autism, but I don't know. I think it could be a result of some type of, mental abuse, mind control abuse. But I don't really know. I'm just guessing. That's just kind of the impression I get. He seems to me like the kind of guy that could flip any direction at any time. And that would make a lot of sense for someone who's kind of, in a way, ushering in, more than anyone, the AI revolution. He's here to sell the technology to the nth degree and make it seem really cool and stuff to the public. And, people love the Tesla cars, don't they? Some of my friends who have Tesla cars, they don't talk much about Elon lately these days. They don't really want to talk about him, but they're not getting rid of their cars. They sure love those. So it seems he's the representative of some type of technological revolution that may not necessarily be a good thing in the end for humanity. But, we'll have to see what happens with all that. And going along the same line of thinking that Elon Musk, is probably this groomed, mind control individual who was, put in the position he's in for very specific reasons by the powers that be, to sort of play good cop at times and bad cop at other times. I mean, they do this a lot. And that explains some of the flip-flopping with some of these people. I'm not saying that's for sure Elon Musk, but I think it's healthy to be completely open to the idea that Elon Musk may have done this purposefully to get the exact reaction that we see in the media as a sort of call and response. Where there's sort of a plausible deniability where he can just be like, hey man, I was just being natural. Quit giving me a bunch of shit over nothing. Stop with the witch hunt. And I'm on board with that, but I'm also on board with the possibility that this was done not because he's a Nazi, but to taint the Trump team, with his influence. To intentionally play into the hands of the media narrative that, all the Trumpies are all Nazis and, white supremacists and such. I'm perfectly willing to get on board with the idea that might be exactly what's going on here. He said some very good things about freedom of speech lately. Okay, fine, but I've been off Twitter for a while. I got kicked off a long time ago. But from what I hear, it's not the complete censorship-free platform that he claimed he was going to make it out to be when he took it over. So I have my doubts about Elon big time. Ultimately, I think when you take into account all the issues going on that Americans are concerned with in the country, and the mainstream news, all they want to do is obsess over these, some kind of gesture like this, or something someone said that might be construed as racist or whatever. It just seems like they're very, it objectively seems that the news media is obsessed with racism to the point where they'll try to put it somewhere where it's debatable that it's there at all, or where it flat out isn't. And I just think it's important to keep calling that out, because they'll keep shoving it in our faces. And if we don't see it for what it is and call it out, we're gonna just sort of become submissive to this type of information, and we're just gonna start assimilating it, and then we're gonna go out in the street and we're gonna be like barking the headlines at people, like just being mouthpieces for the establishment. Because when all of the news sources all echo the same thing at once, that's the voice of the establishment, and it never ceases to shock me how a lot of these older hippie types who were supposed to be all anti-establishment back in the day or whatever, they just repeat what the headlines say as if they are mouthpieces of the establishment. I don't understand it. It's the most ironic thing I've ever seen. Something else I wanted to talk about briefly on this episode, and something I maybe want to do an actual blog in detail on this topic later, is the topic of Zecharia Sitchin and his work, which more than any, I think, popularized this whole ancient aliens thing. This whole, like, oh, the Bible is really talking about space aliens and UFOs and things like this. And this is very popular, especially among atheists, find this very amusing. And I know this because I was one of them. I was really into this stuff. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. Oh, yeah, that thing, that spinning thing with wheels within wheels, or, some old, Aztec carving that looks like a guy's in a spaceship, and all this stuff. And the work of Michael Tessarian is very compelling, where he, sort of looks at different religions and how they all have, these strange anomalies that appear to be flying saucers and things like this. And it's a very compelling theory, but I've come around to believe that it really is just a bunch of bullshit. It sells a lot of books. I mean, Zecharia Sitchin's books. I own The 12th Planet, and I think maybe a couple other of his. And I just found them very fascinating. But, whether you really believe in this stuff or you just think it's really cool and interesting, whatever the case, what you don't get a lot of is the opposing view. And it's important to consider an educated opposing view if you're interested in the truth, because not anyone can tell a cool story, but it's a lot easier to tell a cool, interesting story and make shit up than it is to say something that's true. Because sometimes the truth just isn't as interesting. Although they say truth is stranger than fiction, so I think it can be. So anyway, this guy, Dr. Michael Heiser, who's now deceased, he went on Coast to Coast one time because of a book he wrote talking about this topic, but he was kind of coming from a different angle. And he got invited to ancient. You should look at some of his videos. He's got a really interesting story. He got invited to the show Ancient Aliens, and he was going to participate, but then he found out what they do is they take what someone says and they chop it up, and then like a year later, they'll put it all together in a different way to make it sound like they're saying something that they're not, to suit their own narrative, which is basically like, yes, the Bible speaks of, space aliens and things like this. And he didn't want his words to be mixed up. He didn't want them misrepresenting what he was saying. So, I mean, the guy wasn't forcing people to believe what he was saying. He just didn't want his words mixed up and misinterpreted. So anyhow, this site, sitchiniswrong.com, has a lot of really cool resources. And he's actually a scholar in Hebrew and I believe ancient Sumerian, Akkadian. So this guy can actually read the cuneiform tablets, and he can translate what they say, and he'll straight up tell you, no, Zecharia Sitchin is not telling the truth about this and that. And there are resources here that you can click where you can actually research yourself what these words like Anunnaki and Nibiru and things like this, and you can look at their actual meanings, and you can decide, you can go back and look at Zecharia Sitchin's work or Ancient Aliens or whatever, and you can decide yourself what it means. But one of the most important words, most misrepresented words, and I was a victim of this too. In fact, someone I really admired, Jordan Maxwell, kind of turned me on to this idea of the word Elohim, which in the Bible it says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth or whatever. And this word Elohim is the word that's used for God, and that word is plural. But the thing is, it can also be used to mean singular. It's like the word fish. You can say I see a fish, or you can say I see 10 fish. Some people say fishes. Deer is another word. I saw one deer the other day. I see a pack of deer. Elohim can refer to the one unique individual that is the Lord God, and Elohim can also mean several spirit beings, whatever you want to call it, non-human, God's divine counsel, or what have you. So that's just something very interesting to look into, because Jordan Maxwell had me convinced, And even Bill Cooper goes into this a little bit. Let us make man in our image. Like, oh, wait a minute, what are we talking about? Our image. I thought there was only one God. Are we talking about talking about polytheism here or what? And this guy who made this website, Michael Heiser, he's very good at explaining and dispelling the misconceptions about these words. And the thing is, when you only get one side of the story, you don't really know that you're getting the whole truth. You need to at least get the opposing view so that you can distill it down, take an educated position in the matter, as opposed to just getting one side of the explanation and just only going with that because it just sounds so cool.